grow out of ADHD? That's what I'm talking about today. I'm Dr. Tracey Marks, a psychiatrist, and I make mental health education videos. For a long time, the model of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has been that it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that starts in childhood. Neurodevelopmental simply means that it's an abnormality that affects how your brain develops. As a reminder, the symptoms of ADHD are inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. You don't have to have all three for the diagnosis. Executive dysfunction is also associated with ADHD, even though it's not a part of the formal diagnostic criteria. The expected course of ADHD has been that about 50% of people with childhood ADHD continue to have symptoms into adulthood. But a study from earlier this year found that only 10% of children completely grow out of ADHD. That leaves 90% of people continuing to have it into adulthood. Another finding that goes against the grain of established beliefs about the disorder is that it's not binary, like you either have it or you don't. It's a threshold issue. You can have aspects of it that don't create many problems for you, or you can be fully loaded with the symptoms that cause a lot of impairment. We also thought that once it manifests in a way that comes to the attention of others, like your teachers or caregivers, that those problems stay that way forever unless you're in the group of people who grow out of it. But this recent study looked at 558 children with ADHD combined type, meaning they have both inattention and hyperactivity symptoms. They monitored their symptom progress over 16 years. That's a long time for a study follow-up. They found that only 20% of the children had persistent symptoms the entire 16 years. They found that the natural course of the illness for most people is that it has a zigzag course. The symptoms fade in and out depending on your circumstances. These study findings are also consistent with what I've seen in my practice. I only treat adults, and I've seen adults who started taking medication in elementary school and continue into adulthood. That's the traditional standard course. But I've also seen scores of people who come to me as the first doctor that they've seen for ADHD, at least for getting an evaluation to see if they have it. They may have had mild symptoms as a child, but they got by. But now something has changed where the demands of their life outstrip their ability to compensate for whatever mild deficit they had. These breakpoints that cause a worsening of mild symptoms or a relapse of symptoms that disappeared at one point usually correspond to changes in academic or work demands. For example, you may have been a slow reader in school and/or had some extra energy such that you had trouble settling down in class, but you never really became a discipline problem, and you settled with being a C student, or you spent a lot of time studying just to keep up with your work to make A's or B's, but you made it through high school. But now you struggle to keep up with the college level work, so you see a psychiatrist for the first time in college. Or you squeak by in college, but graduate studies become your breaking point. Another scenario is you do okay in your first job because the work doesn't tax your attentional resources too much, but then you get a promotion or a higher intensity job that depletes your mental resources in a way that you find yourself unable to keep up. These are some examples of how you can seem okay for a while and then not be okay. So what happens to the person who starts having more problems with ADHD as an adult? Are you stuck having problems and needing to take medication forever? Not necessarily. These study findings and my own experience support the idea that your symptoms can come and go. How problematic they are can depend on how much your school, work, or life stresses your weaknesses. Not everyone with ADHD has the same attentional weaknesses. For example, you may have trouble working continuously for more than an hour without becoming irreversibly distracted or losing all motivation to continue. But you're okay with meetings as long as there's interaction with others. This works for you because you can pay attention in conversation, but you don't have as much control when your thoughts are all internal and you're left to yourself to think and focus. In this case, you may do just fine in a job where you work in teams and there's lots of meetings and collaborations. Or you may do well with the kind of job where you travel and meet with people. But sitting at a computer for 3 hours and working on a spreadsheet would be the end of you. ADHD does not create a generic blanket level of deficits that everyone has. There will be things that you're good at and things that you're not good at. Going back to the previous example, you could have an outside sales job where you meet and greet with people, and that fits your vibe very well because you never stay stagnant for more than 40 minutes at a time. If you don't know what you can and can't do well, you could change jobs and get one that requires you to spend hours reading emails and creating spreadsheets and not understand why you're failing miserably at that job. Then you could see me for medication because you took it as a child, but you stopped and did fine for years, and now here you are having trouble again. You get on medication, and then you're now able to keep up with your work, but you don't like that you're now back taking medication. With some exploring, we discover what kinds of tasks let you fly under the radar of your ADHD and the ones that stir up problems for you and make your symptoms unmanageable. You may not have complete control over changing your job responsibilities at the moment, but now you've got something that you can shoot for finding a job that you can do that exploits your strengths and doesn't require much of you in the areas where you're the weakest. If you don't have a therapist, you can still try and figure this out on your own by looking back and seeing what are some of the tasks that you've done, what are some of the environments in which you've worked where things seem to flow for you. You still may have had some bumps, but your ADHD symptoms were manageable. Then look at what you've done where it felt like you were trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Other circumstances that can affect the severity of your symptoms or how much impairment they cause you are diet. The cleaner, the better. Clean means a minimal amount of processed foods and sugar. Also, your exercise level and how much sleep you get matter. If you have another disorder like depression or substance abuse, the course of those illnesses affect the severity of your ADHD symptoms. So if you get depressed, your ADHD can destabilize. I will say that the executive dysfunction tends to be something that hangs in the background even when you have good control over your attention, focus, hyperactivity, or distractibility. Take a look at this video for more on executive dysfunction. I plan to talk more about how ADHD can affect your emotional control, but in the meantime, watch my ADHD skills playlist for managing some of your ADHD symptoms without medication. Thanks for watching. See you next time.